Hey everybody! I have gotten a couple questions recently on how best to ladder down and fix problems when brioche or in fisherman's rib, and typically my answer so far has been don't, but I figure there's probably a better way to explain that. So I thought I would do a couple little swatches today and talk you through how to ladder down and pick up stitches in fisherman's rib and brioche. So both of these fabrics get their shape and their structure by having two strands knit together at the same time. And I don't mean double stranding something, so you use two strands of yarn in the knit and you use two strands of yarn in the purl. The brioche is the best way to explain that because if you look at it, you've got your stitch here that you're normally working and you've got your yarn over on top of it. So those two stitches get worked together every time. And the same happens in fisherman's rib, where you've got a knit one below every other stitch. So you can see here you've got those two strands together, and what that gets you is that incredibly cushy fabric, and that squishy fabric that we all love. But having those two stitches in a row worked every row means that, or those two strands every row, means that when you try to build it back together, it gets a little weird. So the first one I wanted to talk about was brioche, because that's a little easier, believe it or not. So because the yarn over on top in brioche makes things a little easier. With brioche, you are building a yarn over on top every knit stitch when you work a row, and that yarn over is about half the length to 1/3 the length of the yarn used in a knit stitch. So when you go to look at the fabric that you've created and you've dropped down here, pull this forward so you can see that there are strands of varying lengths. So you've got this one here, which is a lot shorter than this one here. You've got this one here, which is a lot shorter than this one here. So the longer ones are the ones that were actually used wrapped around the yarn, or wrapped around the needle and knit. So what you can do, so I've got a little Stitch Fix-It here from French Supply Company, excuse me. So what I'll do is I'll put both the knit stitch that I've dropped and the short strand, which is one of our yarn overs, on the Fix-It, and I will take this long strand, bring both those stitches up and over, like that. Knit stitch on the needle, short strand on the needle, long strand on the needle, knit stitch and short strand, over the long strand, knit stitch, short strand, long strand, over the long strand. Knit stitch, short strand, long strand. It gets a bit tricky up at the top, over the long strand. So, and you see that's kind of, it's pretty much indistinguishable. One thing I would suggest for both brioche and fisherman's rib is to make sure that you do this, that you come back and pick up the stitch and fix the stitch when you would be working it as a knit stitch. With brioche, you can flip it around and fix a purl stitch from the side where it would be a knit stitch. But on fisherman's rib, the count is slightly different on the yarn strands across, so I would wait, get to the other side, and fix it then. So I'm going to grab my stitch fixer here. Now fisherman's rib. This, because fisherman's rib you're knitting below, you are creating the same length of these strands on every single time you create a stitch. So it's not quite as easy to distinguish where you should be going. So on this one, make sure you can see this. You've got your knit stitch, I'm going to take that out again, and you can see you've got kind of this interesting pattern happening over here, and this is kind of going to be your guide for what you want to do. Because if you look down to the rows that you've used, you've got one strand, can you see it there, that goes behind and through, and one that goes in front. And the behind one is the one from the row above. So here we've got two strands. This is the row above, this is the row below. So what we'll do is we'll make sure that we go through both of those, and then the row above is going to be the one that you pull through. So let's look at that again. We've got below, we've got above, and through. below, above, through, below, above, through, below, above, come on, and through. And that will get you back to normal. One thing you might encounter with fisherman's rib is that you'll have a rogue extra strand at the end. That's totally fine. Just do that as you would a normal knit stitch, because what that means is that you're halfway through the fisherman's rib and you will still need to drop down and grab that in the next knit one below. So I hope that helps explain how to go back and fix fisherman's rib and brioche.